Hi, this is Margaret from the blog Don't Call It Bollywood, and today I want to talk about why Hindi films have been in a steep decline for the past 40 years, and nobody seems to have realized it except me, because I just did a little 5 minutes of research on Wikipedia and went, whoa, what the heck's going on? So, the essential problem is nobody seems to understand inflation. We're all excited about the 100 crore movie, the 200 crore movie, the 300 crore movie, and so on and so on and so forth. But nobody stops to think, wait a minute, isn't that just because the rupee has less value than it used to, and therefore our 300 crore film is actually less valuable than a 50 crore film, say 60 years ago? No, nobody thinks like that. Very frustrating. The thing everybody seems to understand about inflation is coffee. So I'll start with coffee as an example. People are always saying, oh, back in my day, coffee was 50 cents. Okay, so back in your day, coffee was 50 cents. That's because 50 cents back in your day had less value than it does now, or had more value than it does now. Now it has less value. So now you go to McDonald's, you get a $2 coffee. That's actually the same as that 50-cent coffee because $2 now has the same buying power as 50 cents back in your day. In addition, the other part of this, which is true for both coffee and Indian films, is that coffee itself has become a whole different thing than it used to be when it was 50 cents. So now you can get your $2 coffee, which is the same as your 50 cents coffee, or you can get your $6, $8, $10 coffee, which is this whole new kind of coffee where it's all about the experience and the nice lighting and the pleasant people who serve it to you and so on and so on and so forth. So that's the two kinds of inflation. 50 cents equals $2 now, plus coffee now equals $10. And that's what's going on with film, especially Indian film. The rupee, lots of inflation, especially if we go back to, say, 1940 versus now, very different value to the rupee. And everybody should sort of know this intellectually, but they just have a hard time grasping it in concept. And the other part of this is films are different now. You no longer go to your single screen where it's a very cheap ticket. You go to your multiplex, you get your popcorn, you get the nice lighting, you get being served, you get all of this stuff. So all of a sudden, your movie ticket, which used to have a routine value of, oh, let's just pick a random number, 2 rupees. So it used to be 2 rupees in 1940. It used to be 2 rupees in 1990, but in the 1990s version of 2 rupees. Now, in 2010, it suddenly stopped being the 2010 version of 2 rupees and became the 2010 version of 20 rupees because it's a whole different experience going to the movies now. It's no longer a cheap entertainment thing. So what does this mean for box office? If we go back and look at the box office records, you will be stunned how once you adjust for inflation, very little money movies have made for the past 20, 30 years. If we go all the way back to the beginning, 1940s and 1950s, routinely, once you adjust for inflation, the top film of the year made 250 to 350 crore. That's amazing. That's like huge news now, and back then, that was just every single year one of those movies would make that much money. And then you get to those really record-breaking movies. The first one to pull out of that 250 to 350 crore pattern, Raj Kapoor. This is why Raj Kapoor is Raj Kapoor. Avara made something around 700, 800 crore in today's money. Can you imagine that? Jumping from 250, 350 to 700, 800? That's why people are still excited about Raj Kapoor. That's why people still talk about RK Studios, talk about what a huge deal he was. And then he did it again. 5 years later, he came back with Shri Chai Sabis. Once again, 700, 800 crore. Nobody else was making this kind of money. And then you get the real record breaker. 1960, Mughal-e-Azam, adjusted for today's money, made over 1,000 crore. And then it happened again the next year. Ganga Jamana also made over 1,000 crore, adjusted for today's money. And then it started going down. Nothing, 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 nothing. Aradhana, boo! Once again, massive record-breaking hit. This is why Rajesh Khanna was Rajesh Khanna, because he just set these records and people couldn't believe how much money his film made. And then he didn't really follow it up. There's a lot of talk about how he had 15 hits in a row, blah, 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 but none of them really made as much money as that very first film. So you go along, nothing, nothing, nothing. Sholay! Wow, once again, breaks 1,000 crore and sets the record. Sholay and Mughal-e-Azam, depending on how you adjust for inflation, they just bop, 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 back and forth at the top of that list until this year, which I'll be getting to later. But Sholay, just unbelievable. And the other thing to remember is Sholay ran for 5 years. 5 years was the most extreme example, but even in the other theaters, it was running 2-3 months. So today we have one massive release, thousands of screens all on the same weekend. That's where the majority of your profit comes from. Back in the day, we're talking dozens of screens. That's it. Topped off. A couple of theaters in the major cities, maybe a few in the minor cities, but then it would travel throughout the country for months or years at a time, and that's where your profit would start ticking in. And they were making much, much more money back then by doing the slow releases that traveled around the country than we make now doing the wide release. And remember, there is a cost to the wide release as well. There's the promos, there's the distribution costs, like actually getting the film out there to all of those places. All of this is expensive, whereas back in the day, minimal promos, minimal reels cut, just traveling around the country, and just in terms of box office, not even in terms of profit margin, but just box office, making so much money, so much more money than films are making now. So Sholay, bright spot, which is good because then it gets very depressing for about 20 years. Throughout the 70s and 80s, TV started changing, VHS came in, people weren't going to the theaters as much as they used to. Plus, it was the era of Amitabh. There was just sort of the same thing being offered over and over and over again, and the box office goes right down. Yes, if you look at the actual money, it doesn't seem like that much of a difference, but if you look at the adjusted for inflation amount, the 80s and early 90s were pretty much the worst era that the industry had ever seen. Until Hum Aapke Hai Kaun. Yay! Another bright spot. Which, again, just crazy records. Well over 1,000 crore. And this is why everybody imitated it. Not just saying, let's make more family-friendly films, but saying, let's make more family-friendly films. Let's actively go after the global market. Let's combine distributors with studios like Rajshri does. Let's do all of these other things to try to chase that amazing profit. And the thing is, nobody ever caught it. DDLJ, longest running film, so I guess there's an asterisk next to it because maybe it'll make a few more rupees at some point. But if you talk about adjusted for inflation, it's just not even close to Hum Aapke Hai Kaun. Nothing is. Throughout the 90s, nothing is. The biggest hits of the Khans that we're still talking about now, they are not even coming close to your average yearly hits of the 50s and 60s. DDLJ, Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, K3G, just nothing compared to what films were doing back in the day. The first time that it really starts getting to that record-breaking hit, Three Idiots, which we all kind of knew. And then following that up, PK, once again, record-breaking. And finally, Dhoom 3, and then Dangal, which I'm going to ignore because some of those figures are a little soft because they're coming out of not very reliable sources. And then finally, Bahubali 2. Bahubali 2 actually toppled Mughal-e-Azam, Sholay, Hum Aapke Hai Kaun. The first time any movie has come close to doing that since Hum Aapke Hai Kaun. It made more money than them. But this is where we get into the coffee means something different now problem. So a lot of the Bahubali profit is, yes, it's a very good film. And it, interestingly, combines the elements that made those previous films such hits. Mughal-e-Azam, it's got the similar epic scale. Sholay, it's got the similar moral conflict sort of thing going on. And Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, it's got the similar family conflict stuff. But it also has IMAX. It also has all these inflated ticket prices we have now. It also has the fancy multiplexes. It also has all of these reasons that tickets just cost more. Not cost more because of inflation, but cost more for real, cost a lot more. So even if we didn't have that, I am fairly confident that Bahubali 2 would still be a record breaker. But it may not have broken those records that Mughal-e-Azam and Sholay set if it weren't for the advantage of movie tickets just cost more money now. So what does this mean for the future? Well, it means just stay awake and be smart when you follow these tickets, stories, and all this other stuff. Remember to adjust for inflation. Remember to adjust for multiplex prices. Remember to adjust for them losing profit because they spent so much money on promotion and on a wide release. And then think to yourself, gee, is the industry actually moving forward, or are we all just fooling ourselves? If you like what I had to say, if you have something to say in response to it, if you have a question or something else you'd like me to cover in a video, hop on over to my blog, Don't Call It Bollywood, and leave me a comment. Thanks!